first of all, I think just managing the off season means fixing or improving all the things we're weak at, right? So the low hanging fruit to me is always mobility, blood analysis, and strength, right? Those three things you can do without swimming another yard, running another mile, or one more pedal stroke on the bike. That's easy low hanging fruit. Not everybody wants to do that, but those elite athletes that I've coached certainly will want to do that and do that because they're always looking for the edge.
Welcome to the Training Peaks Coachcast. I'm your host, Dirk Friel. In each episode, we'll sit down with industry experts to discuss coaching methodologies, the latest research, and leading tools for endurance training. Visit trainingpeaks.com for more training and coaching resources. My next guest is Mike Ricci, who has been coaching and using Training Peaks for over 20 years. He is the founder and head coach at D3 Multisport and After 40 Reboot. He is a past USAT Coach of the Year. He was head triathlon coach at University of Colorado, where he led the Buffs to 4 straight collegiate championships. And he has also coached many Ironman age group winners and national champions. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion, which is focused on tips for the off-season. Mike, when did you create your very first Training Peaks account? It has to be like 2001 or something.
So I was sitting in the room with you and with your partners, with Gear,
Gear Fisher.
And Gear Fisher and Donovan, and then the 4 of us sat there for like 3 hours, and you were showing me everything on the wall and how good it can be, because I was using Excel spreadsheets, right?
Okay.
And I was just sending those back and forth to athletes, and became so cumbersome trying to email those. That was.
Anyways, the point is, you've been an awesome, long-time customer and kind of just mainstay in the sport. That's just so consistent and great. So you have an amazing experience. So really happy to have you on finally on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
And,
excited I'm always jealous. I'm like, why hasn't he called me up to put me on? I mean, it's, and then I run into you the other day in the gym.
Training Bible back then.
That's right.
A few years in, we changed our name to Training Peaks. But we were at one time trainingbible.com.
Trainingbible.com.
Yeah, exactly. So, today I'd love to kind of get out there, and this is actually, you might think of this topic as being small, but it's actually really big. This topic of off season, and there's so many kind of different directions we can take it. You and I were chatting a bit earlier about this, and just simply the fact of like, how long is an off season? And that can mean so many different things to so many different athletes and even sports, right? It's kind of like viewed through different lenses, depending on the sport, age, experience in the sport. I think primarily today we'll be focused on your experience within triathlon, short course and long course, but we can definitely throw in where we see, differences within sports.
Yeah.
But, like someone might be like, well, how long am I supposed to take off? What does that look like for you and the different types of athletes you work with?
Yeah, that's a big can of worms, right? I mean, it could be anything. I typically would think that someone would take, 3 to 4 weeks of just some downtime, right? Like just not unstructured, go ride your bike, maybe go ski. I mean, in Colorado, we're spoiled, right? So you can say to me, hey, Mike, my last gravel race is October 15th. And November 15th, I'm on my skis for 4 months and I'm going uphill.
Right.
And is it off season? It is, but you're still training, right? I mean, You're still doing some actual quality training, especially, people don't realize that, you can go ski uphill, but there's nothing around here that starts at less than 9,000 feet. So right off the bat, your heart rate's through the roof the first couple
I
times.
see you out there in the backcountry going up.
Yeah. It's fun.
It's fun stuff.
I don't ski quite like you, but I'm learning, so it's fun. It's fun.
So, okay, so you're like, again, like within your scope, within your practice, what does this time length look like for most of your athletes for off season? And there's probably a spectrum.
There's a huge spectrum. So, we actually were talking about before, but, you have somebody, let's say they live on the East Coast and really they're racing from, let's say, early June to the end of September, if they're lucky, right, with the weather.
Yeah.
And they're not, September 30th, they're done. They're not racing again until May 1st. I mean, that's a long time.
Right.
Is that whole time off season? No, but a majority of it could be. But there's a lot of things we can work on, right? And one of the things that I've always tried to do with my athletes is work on a specific sport for a period of time. So if someone says to me, hey, I'm doing great at Ironman, but man, I'm swimming an hour 30, like I need to get to an hour 20 to be competitive, an hour 10. We'll spend 8 weeks just focusing on swimming, right? So
Oh, yeah.
we're not ditching the bike and the run, but it's just maintenance, right? Maybe they get on, they do a few VO2 intervals on the bike, and they go run and do some strides, but it's not the focus. The focus is to swim for that period. And I've rotated enough through this where I've done, 8 weeks of swim, 8 weeks of bike, 8 weeks of run, and that's 6 months, right? And then all of a sudden the season's ready to start. They're fit, they've improved their off season. Because, the old joke with triathletes is they only work on their weaknesses when they're injured, right? So you're a bad swimmer, you're a good runner, you pull a calf, you end up in the pool and you're swimming a lot because you got to make up that time, or you
Right.
can't run and maybe you're on the bike, right? So triathletes are very, they're just super, super dialed in, and they want to stick to the same routine all the time, right? It's really hard to get them off that. So if we can get some extra time in the off season on specific sports they're not great at, I think that helps them a ton. Is it off season? Yeah, I think it's off season,
So,
for sure.
if we talk about the textbook, how does the off season fit in with like a season plan? If someone's trying to podium, for example, go to Kona, go to Nice, whatever it may be, championships, that basically means you have a shorter off season. You sort of have to
Yeah.
maintain longer. Whereas if your goal is your first whatever 70.3 or whatever it might be, yeah, you can afford a longer off season. But if you are, let's start with like the more the elite level yet. First,
Mhm.
what might the off season length look like, and then what will be that next phase after coming out of like this transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's just back up for a second. So what is the off season of my athletes? And one of the things that we talk about is we do blood analysis, right?
Okay.
We'll do some kind of mobility assessment. We'll do some kind of strength assessment. Blood draw, bike fit, and we don't test early in the off season because we know everything's pretty low. And certainly you can look at lactate levels and things like that and see where you are November 1st versus January 1st, and are you improving and all that. And we can do that kind of simple stuff through just some zone 2 riding, zone 1 riding, whatever. I mean, just to see, okay, so I'm riding Zwift and I'm at 200 watts at X heart rate, and then 2 months later 200 watts, my heart rate's lower, right? Or maybe I have more watts at the same heart rate, whatever it is, whatever you're going to test it. But I think there's ways to do that. But I think, first of all, I think just managing the off season means fixing or improving all the things we're weak at, right? So the low hanging fruit to me is always mobility, blood analysis, and strength, right? Those three things you can do without swimming another yard, running another mile, or one more pedal stroke on the bike. That's easy low hanging fruit. Not everybody wants to do that, but those elite athletes that I've coached certainly will want to do that and do that because they're always looking for the edge, right? It's, I get the email that, hey, I saw this new aerodynamic thing that, I can put on my bike and I'm going to be faster. I'm like, okay, let's, if you want to invest the money in that, let's do it, right?
Yeah.
I had one of my athletes today ask me about the wind tunnel. I said, yeah, that's something, if you've got the means to do it, then certainly go do that.
Yeah.
Take a minute off your 40K, right? This is an Olympic distance athlete. So that stuff's important too.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up like blood, in terms of like more general health baseline, what have you been ignoring? What might be the underlying causes of certain issues you might be having, whether that be biomechanical, or otherwise, and getting that kind of baseline after you've had some time off. You're not peaked, you're not pushing yourself hard. What are your baseline numbers just for general basic health? From there, are there any issues, right? Then after that is like, okay, let's think about performance. What do these kind of performance numbers look like within, a complete blood chemistry profile? And that can be hard to read. You need to, get with an expert that can really read into those, results and numbers.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And we use a service like Inside Tracker or something like that to just kind of, get the athletes squared away with that. That's cool. It's easy.
Yeah. And then you mentioned mobility, and I saw you at the gym last week. That's primarily why I was in there. I was out for like 5 weeks with a back injury and hip issues. And for me, it's about getting back to the basics again. And I just, I don't need to jump right into squats and stuff. I need to like get more of that mobility, stability around my hip and core. I had obvious, discrepancies right versus left. I went through a really comprehensive 90-minute strength analysis, which actually I've never done in my life. But now that I'm 53, it's damn obvious. Like, I knew there were underlying issues, but now I know what they are and I can actually work with an expert. So maybe dig into that a little bit more. Why do you?
Yeah. So did you do your analysis with Chris or somebody else?
I did. Chris Lee, exactly.
Yeah. So when I went in, I saw Chris in February or so. I emailed him and went in to go see him, and he's got me doing the short hop and then hop up to the box. And I'm like, I don't even know if I could do this, right? Like I could do a box jump with 2 feet, but can I do a short hop and then a hop onto the box? And, I had to do some of those Copenhagen planks he had me do. And, he's like, do 15 of these. And I'm like, dude, my inner quad is like going to cramp in 6 reps. And it did like 8. He's like, okay, you're done. You failed, and it's fine because now you're learning. But I went back this week and I told him, I said, I did 3 sets of 20. He was amazed, but it just, it takes time. But that stuff's wonderful. And I asked him, I'm like, well, when your elite athletes come in here, because you see the pictures of all the wonderful athletes he coaches.
I saw Adam Goucher in there, like my last session.
Yeah. And, Morgan goes in there, Morgan Pearson. And I said, hey, do these guys have discrepancies? He's like, oh yeah, they all have something. I'm like, well, that makes me feel a little better being a 55-year-old man who, is trying to keep his body together and still move well.
Yeah.
I think an expert like Chris is great for the strength stuff, right? Like I would send all my local athletes to him to get assessed and to see what they can work on, right? Because everybody's like, oh, I'm strong. I can squat 200. I can do this and that. I'm like, but are you putting your back in a bad position by doing that squat at 200? Should you not even be doing that weight? Do you have the mobility to do a deep squat? Do you have the ability to do most of my athletes cannot do a side lunge. I mean, it's insane to say that. We did a little clinic 2 years ago before COVID. It was 2009. Maybe it was 2020, but we had it in January. We had about 8 athletes. We did a 2-day clinic. I was teaching them all how to deadlift, and most of them, I would say if there were 12 people, 10 of them could not reach down to the bar, could not squat down and get the bar. And I'm like, these are athletes that go 5 hours and a half Ironman. Huh. And you're like, you can go straight and fast very well. Yeah. You don't move side to side. You have zero mobility in your hips to squat down and pick something up. And it got me thinking like, wow, you're going to be 50 something someday. And you need to be able to A, get yourself off the floor if you ever fall, and B, pick things up, right? Without blowing out your back or, your hamstrings and all that stuff. So I think that assessment thing is a huge piece of this, no matter what your level. And you may laugh at this as a 30-year-old or a 35-year-old, but it's important as you age to continue that mobility. Because if you can stay on top of it now, it'll be a breeze when you get older because you're used to doing it, right? But we sit so much now that just screws everything up. It really, really does.
I mean, we're luckily we have some local experts. Have you found remote ways to get this completed?
Yeah, so I actually through Chris and there's another guy in town that I've used remotely with some of my athletes, like on the East Coast, that they actually can go in and get an assessment done online. Yeah, and then they can get their program set up.
Yeah, cool. Well, like for me, my hip issues were only on the bike. Like of all things, I only had this hip issue, and it's like getting pinched, And so that's my primary sport. So if I were, heaven forbid, like I'm not a triathlete, I don't really have to worry about aerodynamics. I'm not in time trials. I'm more gravel mountain bike guy. Yeah. But if I did have to get an aero position, like I would have been way off, so
your hip would have shut down or whatever's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And let alone try to run off of that,
Right.
But
it's a thing you've done the most, right? So that makes sense that's an overuse injury or it hasn't been addressed, right? So that all makes sense.
Yeah. If we think about, there's no like triathlon, it's 12 months a year now. There's like a major event, even in the US, like there's major events. Memphis or something is this weekend, right? And so it is literally a 12-month-a-year type sport. So there may not be like the traditional off season, although there kind of is if we're thinking North American folks. But if someone is doing 3, 4, 270.3s, Ironman, something else, you can kind of intersperse this off season after each A priority race, right?
That's a great point. I was actually going to bring that up. So when I have athletes, I try to get them to split the season. So, if we start November, December, whatever month it is that they're ready to get going. And my feeling is always to get an athlete in the gym before Thanksgiving, because I always feel like between Thanksgiving and Christmas is that easy to put 5 pounds on without doing anything, right? Because you go to a couple parties, you drink a little more, and this, that, and the other. You're not focused on training because you're in the off season.
Right.
But what I like to do is have them get at least they have some kind of self conscious to say, "Oh, I shouldn't have that 14th cookie. Maybe I'll stop at 12." Right? So the desserts are always so great at these things. It's hard to say no. But what I like to do is have them do an A race like June or July, right?
Uh-huh.
And then have them just take a week or two, family time, vacation, go camping, whatever, like something non swim, bike, run.
Yeah.
Then 2 week, then they get those 2 weeks of just easy aerobic, downtime, and then we can crank up for the October race if it's Kona or a world championship race. But they come back a little fresh, right? And they come back with the idea that, oh, I've got 8 weeks now. It's not like it's not 20 weeks anymore. It's 8 weeks. I can focus. I can tell my family that, hey, you know what? Saturdays are going to be training days, and I'm not going to be here. And they already know that. But at least now they've spent some time together. Family time and some downtime from the high heart rate training and all that to at least focus on something other than swim, bike, run. And then once they jump back in, they fresh and then boom, they're on
Yeah.
their way.
So in this
So
downtime, are you're adjusting zones? I mean, heart rate zones may not change, but certainly pace, power type zones. Are you going and actually adjusting zones?
yeah, sometimes just RPE, right? Like just say, look,
Yeah.
just go out and don't do anything over 5 or 6. I don't care if you run your easy runs at 8 minutes, run them at 10. It doesn't matter. Just go out there and enjoy, go hike,
Right.
right? Go mountain bike, something you normally don't do. Of course, you get your heart rate up doing mountain biking, but if you can keep it mellow,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Um,
definitely turn the zones down a little bit for sure.
yeah. And you mentioned, I believe, bike fit. These kind of down periods are the time to maybe get in, dig in, see where we can make improvements. And therefore, if we have to make changes, you're not going to be doing it during the heart of the season,
Right.
3 weeks out from the A priority race, of course. This is the time to do the bike fit.
For sure. I've always said this. I think that, our bodies are incredible machines, and there's always micro changes every day, every month, every year, right? Like we lose mobility over time as we age, but we're not losing that mobility in one day. Like all of a sudden it kind of creeps up on you, but it's been happening for so long, right? So that bike fit, maybe you don't need to do it annually. I think you do because your body just changes. But I get people that, I'm coaching them and they're like, oh, I got something going on. I'm like, when's the last time you had a bike fit? They're like, well, 3 years ago. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, let's get you in there. And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, it's so much more comfortable. I'm like, yeah. So that's definitely part of the off season.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah,
That's
definitely. And
important stuff.
through travel, you're changing your saddle height, you're changing equipment, you change out the handlebars, and before you know it, you're like 3 centimeters off.
Right.
And
Right.
then you get back in the bike fit. And it may not actually be the settings you need from 3 years ago. Your body's changed.
Yeah.
Again, mobility we've been talking about, that changes. I had to switch to some custom orthotics, and that changed my bike fit. It alleviated, I had more of a flat or a high arch on one side. And so helping support that arch, changed the way I sat, changes in the bike. So, and that eventually led to, a lot better efficiency. And, so I definitely agree with the annual bike fit. What's great too is if you go to the same person, they know your history.
Hmm.
They have your records. They can see what your last bike fit was, and are you still at the same, dimensions. And I actually refer to my bike fitter when I go to look to buy a new bike, and like, what
Yeah.
bike should I consider? What size? And so they're like my consultants. Now that they know my history, my fit, my changes over time, my
Well,
health.
now they know your size as compared to the frame size now, and they can match you up. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so simple now.
Yeah.
Um, it always pains me when people are like, "Well, I really want this brand," and I'm like, "Well, let's see if it actually fits you first. Go get the fit.
Yeah.
Let's see if brand Y actually fits you, or maybe it's brand X, or maybe it's brand A, right? So it's just always, and then the color is the thing, right? So it's always different
The
things
color.
on their
Exactly.
bike.
But what about making adjustments to the bike fit and adapting over time? Like that might take some weeks or months to work in some new depending on how aggressive they're going or changes. I mean, have you had those experiences before?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've always been told, and maybe it's changed, but the bike fitters have always said, don't just go out and ride 50 miles the first weekend you have a new bike fit. Like, give your body some time to adapt to the changes. And if you're doing this in the off season and your bike's on the trainer, that's an easy way to do it, right?
Right.
Like, you can just get in the aero bars for 5 minutes at a time and be like, oh, that's kind of uncomfortable. And then the next time it's 8 minutes and feels a little better. And, just kind of slowly ramp it up. I have a lot of my athletes will ride the bars all the time on the trainer, and I'm like, well, you got to start engaging that core and get in the aero bars
Yeah.
and learn that this new position, right? Because your body's got to get used to it if you're actually going to race it at a high level.
But then you have to take that outside at some point, because if you're going to Nice, it's very technical. You got to learn, downhills, ascending, et cetera. Even Kona, crosswinds, and the aero position is not always the most favorable place to be. But learning, how that bike reacts in descents and cornering and crosswinds and all in the new bike position is different.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. This off season can be a good time to look into diet.
For sure.
Changes with diet. Sometimes little tweaks can go a long ways. Any advice around digging into diet, analytics, or changes, things to think about?
Yeah, like having a coach, I think a nutritionist is a good investment, because you have someone that holds you accountable, and they're going to say, look, you had your blood analysis done. This is what you have to work on. Maybe it's more macronutrients. Maybe you're working on, it's more protein in your diet, or it's, less sugar, or it's less fat, or whatever it is. But when you have someone like an expert that's, knows what they're doing, they've worked with hundreds or thousands of athletes, they know your, body type, and they can say, okay, this is what you really need to work on. I think that's the way to do it. I mean, coaches, and I tell my athletes this all the time. I'm, look, as far as nutrition, I can get you 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
If you have something that's, you're, a dietary issue, maybe that's where you want to get an expert to say, this is, what you can and can't eat, and this is how we're going to get you to your goal weight, or, change what's happening with your blood. But that's not, coaches always try to be the everything to all their athletes. And I have always tried to farm some of that stuff out, because I think that there are people out there, as much as I know, or there's always people that just know those little niches of things that we're like, well, I didn't even think of that, right? Like, that's something that's, that's not always our expertise, I guess. But I think it's important to have a nutritionist just to kind of bounce things off of and know really what you should be doing.
Yeah, and then also digging into nutrition during the race, and I think lessons learned from the season, what went well, what didn't go so well. Sometimes that comes down to actually nutrition on, in the event itself,
right?
Which is still definitely nutritionist, working with them. But, talking about how to incorporate these changes into training so that you're training the gut, you're getting more in the habit of eating more often for whatever reason, or however amount you decide you need to take in with your nutritionist and coach, but kind of working that into the season program as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that a lot of instances, and at least my experience, we have a lot of athletes that undereat sometimes. They don't realize, what a big effort actually takes in terms of carbohydrates and calories and hydration and sodium and all those different things. In the off season, if you're training inside, it's hard to get that heat element and say, I want to train at 80 degrees and 80% humidity. But at least with your, the amount of time you might be on the trainer, or doing like a bike run brick, like something you're putting some volume into, that's a good time to test out those new products and see if they actually work with your stomach, digestive system. Do you have to go to the bathroom right after? I mean, is it something that, okay, I'm doing an Ironman, it's going to take me 10 to 12 hours. Is this something that's sustainable, right? Do I like the taste of this? Like, all of it.
Right.
And of course, we both know this, but once you get outside in the heat, and that gel doesn't taste so good after 6 hours, right? Like, you loved it at hour 4, but hour 6 you're starting to get cranky, and it's not, So those are the kind of things you got to test out, though, constantly.
Yeah, definitely. I think this kind of relates. I mentioned season review. You have this transition phase, you have this downtime, but it can be a good time to reflect. Talk to us about reflecting on the past season. How might you go about that with your athletes? Lessons learned. What went well, what went wrong?
Yeah, I'm a strong advocate of my athletes writing a race report after the race, right?
Okay.
I tell them, let's look at this, positive or negative. It's something to look at. And as we get into the off season, you were complaining that, man, I wasn't very good on the hills. I need more work in that. Like, or, I wasn't good in the wind. I wasn't good with, pushing a big gear for a long time. Like all these things, as they're writing them down and keeping a journal after the race, these are all the things we can address in the wintertime. And maybe pushing a big gear isn't even about a big gear. Maybe it's about getting in the weight room and getting stronger, right? So there's these things that they all tie in, right?
Yeah.
So just knowing, how you race, because that's really what we care about. I mean, obviously the day-to-day training is fun and the journey is always the bigger piece of this. But on race day, when you want to perform that 1 or 2 or 3 days a year, which is, always hard to taper for that one event, as we
Yeah.
know. But those that big pressure that you have in that big moment, if something is not going correct, like let's correct it, let's fix it, let's make that big gear issue not an issue anymore next year. Let's make you stronger. Let's do more big gear work in the winter. Let's hit the weight room.
Yeah.
I
No,
think that's important.
it's a little bit of a slap in the face sometimes, which is a rude awakening. But you'd be like, 4 months later, be like, hey, let's reread that race report. And
It's hard to do.
remember that feeling, remember that will, that want, that desire to change whatever it is. Well,
Yes.
this is our moment now. And I know it's not your most favorite thing to do, but this is what you wrote. This is what we agreed upon. Now let's implement it, and
I love it. I'm having this with one of my athletes right now.
oh,
So they were hell bent on changing nutrition in the off season, and I've
what's
been
their
asking
names?
for a food log. What's that? I'll
What's
give you
their
the names.
names? Go ahead.
And so I've been asking for a food log, and I'm not getting it. And I'm like, okay, so this is going to be a challenge, right? So
Right. Well,
it's
I would in Training Peaks, there's the annual training plan, and there's one column that's just notes, just open text. And when something eventful happened, like they did a test, they got injured, whatever it might be, some notes I'd put in there that we could then sit down and we had one page that we could review, which were the highlights and the lowlights of the season, and let's reminisce and let's see what went well. Let's try and duplicate that. Okay, these things didn't go as planned. We can improve here. But that one sheet really kind of guided my postseason review with the athlete. And then we could dig into the race reports and logs, et cetera, from there. That was kind of one tip that I did, with my athletes.
I like that. Yeah, that's great.
So how about planning for next year, setting goals? This is a good time to set goals, and
I think once the season's over and it's still fresh in your mind, like I don't like to see athletes take a week or a month and say, okay, now let's start planning. Let's do it while it's fresh in your mind. That motivation is still there to improve what you need to improve. I think that's a big part of this. Like you said, like all those things you said, and you want to improve on. Let's improve on. Let's take that step.
Right.
And I think writing it down obviously is the most important part of this. There was a study done. You probably know this. There was a study done at Harvard in the early '80s, and they had a group of students and they asked them if they were going to write their goals down, and they said no. And that was like 10% of the class. And then 30% of the class said they thought about writing goals down, but they didn't actually do it, but they did think about their goals. And then the third group wrote the goals down. And they fast forward to 10 years, and the second group was making like 30% more money than the first group. But the group that actually wrote it down was making 50% more in income than the second group. So writing your goals down is so important to your success. And we just, I used to have that God, it was a Velo News diary every year, right? And I used to write my goals in every week, right? I'm going to swim 10,000 yards. I'm going to bike 200 miles. I'm going to run 30 miles. That thing was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. I've got tons of those things in my closet filled out,
Yeah.
So,
like sitting down and writing the goals is like
mm-hmm.
really getting real with yourself. And
Yep.
it's even another level of getting real with yourself when you have to share it to your coach. And,
Right.
and that
That's
feedback come back from the coach. How realistic is this? Is this, all those kind of back and forth negotiations, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something called the accountability mirror. And what you do is you put your goals on a sticker, and even it's for the week, right? Dirk's going to go out and ride 300 miles this week. You stick it on your mirror, and on Sunday night, you look at it and you say, man, did I hit that goal? That's a hard one, right?
Yeah. That's at the essence of coaching, accountability.
Right.
I'm accountable to my program, to my goal, to my coach, and ticking those off each week. And you don't have to, it's not about doing it perfectly every time. I think the
Right.
consistency, obviously, and that might be a goal, is just to create more consistency in a
Be
training
more
program,
consistent. Yes.
right?
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. What about testing? Any going into the lab or field testing? What times of year do you incorporate that? And is it
It's
good to do
great.
it right at the very beginning after a transition where you are baseline? I actually love that. I'm like, I have nothing to lose here. I can be as
You have
I
nothing to
want.
lose. And for years, I mean, this is kind of, sick and twisted, but every New Year's Day, I would get up and do like a 30-minute TT on the trainer and say, okay,
Oh,
there's my number.
wow.
And there's where I am. And maybe my watts are 210 right now,
Right.
but where are they going to be in 4 weeks, right? And where are they
Yeah.
going to be in 8 weeks and 12 weeks? That's kind of fun. And like you said, it's kind of you're playing with house money. Like it doesn't matter. It could be, really low, and then you've got time to build it up.
Yeah.
But if you surprise yourself, then that's motivating too.
I know.
So it's really, you don't lose either way.
It is exactly. It's motivating because it doesn't really matter, and it's like the baseline that you're like hoping to beat, and it becomes
Mhm.
easier and easier to beat. I guess harder and harder the farther you get away from the goal. But um, and maybe lastly, like, do you have athletes that you actually have to convince to take this time off? Like they are
Oh,
so
100%.
hell bent at getting that workout done, et cetera. And you're like,
Yeah.
hey, this
Let
is your
me
time.
Yeah, so here's my feeling on that whole thing. So I think that, as an elite athlete, you're gonna sorry about that. You're gonna take off, 3 or 4 weeks and you're back into it. Because you got big goals, it's Kona, you're a professional, whatever it is. I mean, maybe 3 to 4 weeks and you're kind of back into it. With my, you know, elite age groupers, they definitely do not love taking time off. So there always has to be some other kind of carrot out there. And it may be the weight training, like just get in the gym 3 days a week and pedal as easy as you want a couple times a week and run a little bit and maybe get in the pool and splash around. And that's great. And they do that for a month and they get your heart rate, keep their heart rates down. I think that's a great way to help them recover, refresh, and then reframe the next year, right? But I think that there's some level, and I don't know if it's Zwift or it's trainer workouts or whatever, but there's some level of entertainment that it seems like athletes need at this point, right?
Mm.
And I don't have a lot of athletes that have 15 to 20 hours a week to train. I've got a couple that have 15 hours a week to train, but most of them are in that 8 to 10,
Okay.
maybe 12 range. And they don't want to pedal in zone 2 for 2 hours, even though I beg them to do it. They're like, can you just give me some kind of workout with some intervals in it?
Right.
And maybe it's a high zone 2. Maybe we touch zone 3. I don't really love a lot of zone 3 for short course racing. I think it's got to be harder. It's got to be easy. But there's got to be some level of entertainment. And even going to the pool and doing a set of 20 50s on X and say, what pace did you hold for those 20? And that's literally, whatever that is, 14 minutes of hard swimming for the week. And maybe you do that once a week just to kind of keep them engaged and have them do something that it's almost entertaining, right? Like it's almost like, okay, I'm going to go do this thing and I'm going to stay engaged and then I'm going to do all the easy workouts he's asking me to do. Right. But they want that one thing sometimes that they could just wrap their head around. Are they improving? Can they see it? Even though you and I both know, like, we don't need to measure anything in the off season, like just go have fun. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people just need that engagement piece to say, okay, I'm going to listen to you, but I'm going to go ride Central Park and I'm going to ride my loop as hard as I want. And I'm going to try to bust 20 minutes this time or whatever it is. Right. So there's some of that, high achievers are hard to hold back. I think that's the big thing sometimes. They want to go. And it's hard to convince them otherwise. I think it's a hard thing.
Well, I think one of the purposes of an off season or transition is that fitness is not linear and it just does not continually improve. And there's the strong argument to be made to kind of bring it down a notch, to get systems healed, to allow you to become stronger.
And I agree with that 100%. Yeah. I totally agree with that.
Like I do feel a lot of athletes stagnate because it is so consistent. Like consistency, yes, you need to get the time in, consistency of getting the workouts in. But if there's so much intensity involved every single week, that the stagnation happens, the plateau happens, there's no real ebb and flow of the training to allow this breakthrough. or allow them
Right.
to do, a big peak week and then, a taper and a super compensation,
Yeah, I think that yeah, you're just saying something I was gonna repeat what you just said. I had something on
You
the tip
know,
of my tongue that was
it isn't linear. You don't just build
yeah.
fitness.
Right. And if you look at like the physiology of, speed work and intervals and all that stuff, you probably peak probably at the max at 12 weeks. So it's like a 6 to 12 week block. And I always tell
Aerobic
my
takes
athletes,
longer, anaerobic is shorter.
right. So like if you peak in those 12 weeks, like after that race, we're not doing intervals for a couple of weeks. Like we're just going to go run and ride easy and just chill out and let our bodies recover from that. And then we can start the next block of, intervals. But for people to do, and I see this all the time, to do 20 weeks of intervals and then wonder why they get hurt, it's mind boggling, right? It's like
Yeah.
your body can't handle that stress week after week after week. I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah,
It needs a break.
Yeah,
It just needs a
changing
break.
the stressors to the system, allows it to grow in different dimensions in different ways, and it's always you need some consistency to get raise the levels, but only to a certain point. Then you've just stagnated. So mixing it up, downtime, in the end, is going to make you faster. Maybe 6
Right.
months from now. Right.
Right.
That's
But
hard.
like you said, you change the stressor and like you say, okay, you're a short course guy. Maybe you only ride 2 hours for a long ride. Let's go do 3 or 4 days of 2 hours of riding and let's see what that does. Cause I've done stuff like that. And then you get that big aerobic boost at the end and they're like, well, how did I get faster? I haven't been doing intervals. And I'm like, man, you don't understand this.
Yeah.
Like, it's just changing the variable like you're talking about. And that's pretty easy to do.
Thinking about changing the variable, what about like just going from triathlon to like we're going to do this marathon, like focus on this marathon? You probably had experience with that too, right?
This is the time of year that I have athletes actually transitioning. They just finished 70.3,
Okay.
5-hour fitness. They're going to go into a race that's going to take them 3.5 hours. They're like, oh, I only have like 6 weeks. I'm like, you've been running 15 miles, getting ready for this half. You're right there. You need a couple of weeks and that's it.
Right.
So that's always an easy transition. And that's what some triathletes consider their off season, right? Like I'm going to train for marathon,
right.
which is comical to me because they still need to like just relax, So, but yeah, that transition of different sports is great. I love to see triathletes get out on the trails, whether it's gravel or mountain bike, and just not to get hurt, but just to do something different. A little hand-eye coordination. I mean, you go on a trail and all of a sudden you got a 16% grade for a quarter mile and you're in the lowest gear in your mountain bike and you're trying to get up this thing and you're breathing through the roof and you just hit VO2.
Yeah.
And then you got some downhill, you got to pay attention. You can't just take the time off. It's not like road cycling, right? Yeah. Like road cycling, you can go hard, just kind of hang in there, look around a little bit, but not biking. You got
same with trail running. You hit some of these trails and your hands are on your knees and you're just hiking uphill with, so that's a good workout without going all out.
Exactly.
How about to wrap up? What's your top 2 kind of bullet points for folks to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. So, off season, I think has to be a time that you can kind of relax and keep a low heart rate for a few weeks and maybe get off of the swim, bike, run. And I might say 3 things, but I think that blood work is huge. And I think mobility and movement are both huge. I mean, those 3 things, low heart rate, mobility and movement, and a blood analysis. You do those 3 things, 3 or 4 weeks, you are set to have a great season the next year. Writing your goals down like you had said. So the list goes on and on. But
get that dental surgery schedule.
Oh yeah,
for the off season. Yeah, exactly. Those elective surgeries.
That's right.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. This is great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dirk.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the gym.
All right, for sure.
Thanks for listening to the Training Peaks Coachcast. Visit trainingpeaks.com for more training and coaching resources.